Getting to Madagascar was an ordeal in and of itself. On the 8th, we were meant to get the 7:30am flight to Sydney, but the weather in Sydney shut down all but one of the runways, which led to major delays in us leaving. But we were assured throughout the entire time that the next plane that we were meant to be on, like the one from Sydney then to Hong Kong, would also be late leaving. And the plane finally started boarding at 10am. They scanned our boarding passes and then told us we couldn't board because we wouldn't be able to catch a connection. So we needed to go back to the check-in, where they would get us on a direct flight to Hong Kong. We had to get the next connection. They also said that we would need to pick up our bags before we go to the check-in counter. Halfway back to the check-in counter, we realised they hadn't actually told us where to pick up our bags from. So we asked a help counter in the terminal where to get the bags from, and they told us where to get our bags, but also that we need to ring our tour operator to get new flights. When we got down to pick up our bags, the third Qantas employee that we saw told us, no, Qantas would sort it all out, don't bring the tour operator. So we get our bags and we go down to the check-in counter, and we were given two options. The guy on the counter did try to find other things, but he couldn't. So our two choices were either come back tomorrow and try again, or go to Sydney that night, pay for a hotel, and then just do the Sydney to Madagascar part tomorrow. The problem with the try again strategy was that even without any delays, the time between the domestic flight to Sydney and the international flight out was very tight. And you had to go from one terminal to a whole other terminal and, go through it being international and immigration and stuff. So Grand Cat decided to take the second option. And I was lucky that he did too, because the flight that we should have been on if we had stayed in Melbourne was delayed again, so we wouldn't have got that connection anyway. So we flew to Sydney, getting there a bit after 1pm, got a hotel room for the night. So when we arrived in Sydney, we just had to get to the hotel. We asked the hotel, they told us that there was a shuttle bus that went from the airport to all the nearby hotels. So we rang them and asked where to get the shuttle from. But the explanation that they gave us was, on the road between X and Y. We're like, no, we don't know this area. We're at place Z. They went, well, if you go to X or Y, like, but where is that? So anyway, in the end, we got a taxi. And the next morning, we got the shuttle bus at 6:50am to the airport to get on our Hong Kong flight. That was about a 9-hour flight. It was a pretty reasonable flight. I had working in-flight entertainment, not that we used it. We tried to sleep for most of it. We got our food and drink and all the nice Qantas things that you get. We got to Hong Kong at about 6pm. We didn't leave again until 12:25am. So we had time to try and check out the airport. The only problem is, with that timing, pretty much everything was closing. So we didn't get to really see much as far as the shops go. The other fun issue was that, according to the sign, there is 530 gates at Hong Kong Airport, and we didn't know which one we were at. So we didn't know which direction would be the less out of our way direction until about an hour and a half before the flight time. And then we tried to sit down and charge our devices, but discovered that most of the charging ports that they had weren't working. We tried about 12 different points before we found one that was working. Then we, found out where our gate was, and it was down the other end of the terminal. Far enough down the other end of the terminal that you had to take this little train thing. Now, our previous two flights had been on Qantas. From now on, it was Ethiopian Airlines. The difference in the planes was massive. Getting on the plane, it was already half full, as this was like a stopover for the plane. And getting to our seats, we found that they were already occupied. So these interlopers had evidently got on where the plane had started off and got seen that the plane was mainly empty and spread out and ended up in our seats. They did begrudgingly go back to their seats, and the plane quickly filled up. It was pretty much a full flight, and they had the in-flight entertainment systems in the back of all the seats, but our entire row didn't work. The window that I could see out of, it was all scratched up on the outside. We did get, our food and drinks, so that was good, and we did get to Addis Ababa. So everything was fine, it was just different to Qantas. And then when we landed in Addis Ababa, we got off the plane, and where it had landed, you had to get a bus then to the terminal. And so we were waiting out on the tarmac for this bus because there was seemingly only one bus and about 3 bus loads of people that had to go. It wasn't like a really short trip, so yeah, we were out there for a while, out on the tarmac watching these other planes land. But we weren't too worried about all of that because we did have a 3-hour layover scheduled there. And when we first got in then to the actual airport, the gate was displayed for our next flight. So oh yep, that's good, we'll go down that end of the airport and go set up down there. On our way down, we stopped at Burger King that we found and had some lunch. So we get up to what the gate said to say is. We set ourselves up there. About an hour before the flight, the gate displays a different flight. We're like, well, that's not good. So we went down and checked, and they've changed our gate. They changed it to the other end of the airport, where we found 2 plane loads of people waiting, because evidently there was our plane, and then there was the plane after our plane. And everyone was waiting there. But again, this was a spot where they had to take a bus from the terminal to the aircraft. So we had to get on a bus again to go onto the plane. This time it was a pretty empty flight. It was empty enough that I think pretty much everyone on board could have had an entire row to themselves. And so, because Ethiopian Airlines didn't really care if you moved seats, that's what Grand Cat did. He went and got himself his own row and sat down there. This time at least the, in-flight entertainment on my, the seat in front of me was working, kind of. Even though it was missing a few buttons and wasn't acting as a touchscreen like it was supposed to. But I still got to watch 2 movies, so that was good. We did get fed again, so, all good. By 1:40, we'd landed in Madagascar. Going through the airport, we had to buy a visa. Before then, you went through immigration and customs. And then we were met outside by a guy who was then the guy who would drive us to the hotel. Our guide later met us at the hotel and introduced us to the 9 others in our group. And yeah, that's how we got to Madagascar. Time to play Frog Up.